Let's bring in a couple of people that have seen a few elections in their day. Michael Kroger, Stephen Conroy, gentlemen, great to see you. Let's talk about New South Wales in a moment. Stephen, I want to start with The Voice because it was a big day in Canberra, an emotional, quite a powerful news conference from the Prime Minister, accompanied by representatives of the Voice working group and people that have been around these processes for a long, long time. What do you make of it, that development? There's still no bipartisanship within the Parliament, certainly not with the Liberals.
Well, look, Albo campaigned on this as a priority issue, and if you remember election night, he kicked off by talking about it, and he has been consistent that he is absolutely, as he said today again, I'm all in. So now we've got the meat on the bones. Now we've got a situation where all of the critics are, there's no shadow dancing anymore. There'll be an argument about the substance of the amendment, and that's a good and positive thing. And the case is there to be made, that there'll be alarmist claims. There'll be a whole bunch of people who want to pretend that, the sky's falling. And there'll be some eminent voices who have doubts. But I think we'll really now see, a good debate. I hope it's a moderate, sensible debate without people, obviously Barnaby's already in the mix, wanting to try and pretend that just because you're opposed to it, everyone's calling you a racist. It's off to an inflammatory start from Barnaby, but there's no shock there. He's not a major figure in the coalition anymore. I would hope, wiser voices are able to, come to bear within the coalition to see that their concerns have now been addressed. But I think the really substantive, good debate will now take place. The majority of Australians appear to be, on the surface before today, in favour of it. Whether that translates into, the 4 states we need, that's going to be the challenge. Obviously, I would expect New South Wales and Victoria to vote for it. I would hope that South Australia, I'm told, is pretty positive. So that's really down to they've got to get one state out of Tassie, WA and Queensland. So the job's there to be done. And I know, as Albo said, he's all in. He'll be out there campaigning for every day.
Michael, Peter Dutton, in his response, he's certainly not ruling out coming on board with the campaign, but what he says he wants is the Solicitor General advice released. And if the Prime Minister and the Voice working group have gone contrary to the advice of the Solicitor General, the PM and the government, they need to be upfront about it. So he really did harden that call for the advice to be released today.
Change the Australian Constitution. This is not done lightly, and Albo shouldn't try and shame people into supporting a proposal which is racist at its heart and should be defeated on those grounds alone. Giving a special privilege to one section of the Australian community over everybody else based on race is a proposition that no Australian should vote for. And it's disappointing that Albo can't see that. He can't see past a group of good-hearted people, but the professional, constitutional lawyers, professional Aboriginal activists, politicians, journalists, academics, constitutional lawyers having this discussion. I'm not sure, Kieran, too many people, by the way, in Western Sydney are rushing to get to the polling booths to support The Voice. I think this is a group of people talking to themselves. There's very little debate amongst people in a lot of the areas that I go to, where you're talking to people on the ground at Liberal Party meetings and in the streets and handing out our vote cards and things. There's very little discussion about people desperate to support The Voice, Kieran. They want to know what's going to happen about mortgages, mortgage interest rates. They want to know about the cost of living, the cost of energy. That's what they're talking about. So I think in that context, no wonder Latham is doing quite well in Western Sydney. They're the issues people are talking about. They're not talking about their voice and the voice, and they're not going to be. They're really not going to be too influenced by Albo getting emotional at the press conference when various people haven't got a chance of getting the polling booth, mate. They may not even be able to save their house.
Stephen, Kieran, can I make the following points? Yep. Michael sort of points to Western Sydney. Well, let's be clear. Western Sydney overwhelmingly voted against same-sex marriage. and it was still carried by a huge majority. So this is not like marginal seat campaigning. This is Western Sydney, more conservative on issues like that, understand, but it didn't carry the weight. It didn't defeat, despite overwhelming opposition. High 50s, 60s, 70s in some of those Western suburb seats against same-sex marriage. So I'm not saying that that makes them irrelevant. I'm simply saying don't base your judgments on Western Sydney in the traditional political sense. But the other thing that worries me about this is the behaviour of Lydia Thorpe. I mean, the sort of scenes we've seen today, the sort of self-indulgent behaviour we've seen from her consistently over the last 6 months, I think will play very badly. And that she's in danger of actually causing the voice to lose just because of her sheer selfishness.
The point that I put to the Prime Minister today, Michael Kroger, was about the argument that's made by the likes of Greg Craven, Frank Brennan previously in recent weeks, and other eminent constitutional experts who are worried about the reference to executive government. In fact, there's a suggestion that the Solicitor General had advised that the voice should be to the Parliament and ministers so that it doesn't necessarily incorporate or catch senior public servants within that. They're concerned about this being caught up in the High Court for years to come. These are supporters of the voice. So It's a challenge for Anthony Albanese to overcome. It's not just those who are fundamentally opposed to the principle, as you are, but those who support it, who worry about the legal wording of it still.
Absolutely. And look, there are other questions. I don't know whether any of your erstwhile learned colleagues at the press conferences have asked. To clarify for me 2 questions, does it mean the voice can lobby the Governor-General directly, because he is a member of he is the executive government, ultimately? Can they lobby the Governor-General to ask him not to sign a bill into law that's been passed by both houses of the Parliament? So that's question number 1. And the other question is, of course, that's been raised now is, does the voice have a right to stop Australia going to war? I mean, the Parliament doesn't have to be consulted by the Cabinet, but does the Cabinet have to consult the voice about whether Australia can go to war or not? And if that's true, well, that would be a preposterous proposition that the people elected by the Australian public don't have to be consulted, but those that are not do.
Michael and Stephen, we're almost out of time. Just 20 seconds each. Your prediction for the New South Wales election. Stephen, first to you.
Look, I think there's a sneaking confidence from Sydney that the momentum is in Minns' favour, that minority government for Labor looks more likely, and there's even pundits. I saw Richo earlier in the week, and when it comes to New South Wales politics, I don't often ignore Richo's advice, and he had a smile on his face when he said no, majority government for Labor.
Okay, yeah, he's normally pretty close to the mark, isn't he? Michael, your thoughts?
Absolutely.
Well, 16 years is a big ask. Labor did it in South Australia between 2002 and 2018. 4 wins in a row. 4's very hard. To go from 2011 to 2027, as much as Perrott Hayes done a great job and I admire him greatly, I think the polls tell you it's more likely to be a Labor minority government, but I hope I'm wrong.
Michael, Stephen, great to see you. Catch you over the weekend.